Hello, welcome to Zen Mode HQ as we work through another book review. Hello, welcome to Zen Mode HQ. Today we are going to be reviewing The Magical Revival. This is by Kenneth Grant. It is the first of the Typhonian trilogy. This is a collection of 9 books, 3 trilogies you could think of. This is book 1 of 9. It has a great depth of esoteric information through this as Kenneth Grant takes our hand and walks us through understanding the current of Crowley and Thelemic themes and the deep symbolism and how to go about using them. He also writes as well about Austin Osman Spare, the great esoteric artist, and his use of charging sigils, how he would blank the mind and have a current run through the sigil. He talks about as well the language of symbolism that he developed and his techniques of magic, again very similar to Crowley, which involves sex magic. He also writes about Diane Fortune, and boy, she was also very similar to Crowley. They had similar roots. I believe she was born in 1890, so she was also right around the time of Crowley. And he writes as well about her teachings, such as doing protection against astral attacks, for example, and how she had a boss that preyed on her when she was younger. He also writes as well about the Gnosis of Light, or also you could think of it as the cult of Shaitan, which was, pre-Christian Gnosis, and he makes the case that that very well might have been the being Ayahuasca that Crowley had summoned. He talks as well about a being Osman had summoned. That's a pretty interesting story. There was 2 people who were just dabblers, laymen, and they had pressured him to summon an elemental. He apparently did the rites to summon an elemental after warning them he shouldn't be doing that, but they told him to do it and he proceeded to do it. They say a green haze appeared in the room, a hand appeared, there was a terrible stench, and then 2 piercing eyes were staring at them. They were begging him to then banish it. He then proceeded to banish it, and the one died within a week later for unknown causes, and the second was in a mental institute 1 week later as well. Osman is fascinating. He's an artist. His art as well is in here. You can actually see aesthetically here. The book is absolutely beautiful. He explains the symbolism here. Obviously, if you've read Israel Regardie's Golden Dawn brick that I have right there, you're going to recognize this as being on the floor of the adepts for the Golden Dawn. Obviously, as well, if you read enough Lon Milo Duquette, especially in Thoth Tarot, he does a wonderful job of breaking down the symbolism of the Rosy Cross and what each of these means. You can see that the dot there is really prominent. It's beautiful. It's a wonderful book. Underneath the dust jacket, we actually see more symbolism. Starfire Publishing, I believe that's the name of the publisher. I think I heard that they had a fire. So it's worth just warning many people to be careful where they buy this book. I've seen this book on eBay listed for like hundreds and hundreds of dollars, and on Amazon for hundreds and hundreds of dollars. And then on, I think it's called J.D. Holmes and Miskatonic Books, then you'll see it there for like 40 to 80 bucks, somewhere in that range, depending on if you get a soft cover or a hardcover. Post Fire, I believe they did many more printings of these, and I think they're doing the entire run. For me personally, I just read through book 1. I wasn't sure so much about Kenneth Grant. I also have 2 other books, numbers 2 and 3 of the trilogy. So I'm very excited to drill into this. Would I say this is a good read? I would say this is a must read if you are interested in these concepts, especially with Kenneth Grant being such a pillar with his own works and his lodge. I would say that it's dangerous to just go into this without having read a lot of source material, as he's making continual footnotes and citations that you're constantly having to look up. I have an entire shelf also dedicated to Crowley back there, and it was well used as he's making reference to Crowley over and over and over again. There was a brief bit of time where he actually lived with Crowley He talks about being essentially his familiar, but he took care of Crowley near the end of Crowley's life. Apparently, Crowley, he doesn't say it in this book, but Crowley had wrote in a letter that he didn't treat Kenneth Grant very well. But in the book, Kenneth Grant talks about some of the exercises Crowley did with him. He would draw, for example, some type of symbol that was unrelated to Kenneth Grant at that time to test his astral sight. He would then provide him the need of doing visualizations where he would see a door, sometimes drug-induced, like using ether, for example. And he would then visualize the door opening and seeing the symbol through the door, and then what that symbol then would materialize out of it at that point, and he would relay this information back to Crowley to see if he actually had proper astral sight. Interesting techniques. Him giving us a handheld walk through Crowley is well received, as Crowley is so dense in his writing, and he's all over the place with Eastern and Western esotericism and Hindu concepts, Hebrew concepts. It's just you have to be so well read to just be able to walk through Crowley, and he really did a wonderful job of walking us through that. He also did a wonderful job as far as taking us through explanations of gematria. For some of us, this won't necessarily be new material, but for many, it absolutely will be. And the keys, for example, inside Thelema, based off of numbers. I've talked about this in other lectures, but this book does a wonderful job as well. And he also does a wonderful job of providing commentary on the Book of the Law, sort of, I would say. At the very least, he talks about disciples of Crowley and their pursuits of the great work. He writes as well about Jack Parsons. He doesn't call out Ron Hubbard by name, which is very interesting. I believe he calls him Adept X, if memory serves right. But he actually never refers to Ron Hubbard by name. But he does talk about the story of Jack Parsons, where Jack Parsons of NASA had a lover, and he joined a lodge. His lover then ended up fathering a child with the adept of the lodge. So poor Jack Parsons lost his wife then, and then was paying money to his wife, which was going to essentially the guy who took his wife. Kenneth Grant then makes the case that this guy was then attacking Jack Parsons on the astral plane. So he had to defend himself against this guy who he's literally giving money to. That gentleman was very interesting as well. Crowley had instructed him that he needed to tattoo the mark of the beast to his forehead or his hand, live in almost like a barren desert, and build a temple with stone by himself. And because of his signs of the zodiac, his birth chart, Crowley was under the interpretation that this guy was a god garbed in the flesh of man. And then obviously the disciple ended up fizzling out and wrote Crowley just saying he was a total failure and all. It's kind of a sad story, frankly. But anyways, that was who Jack Parsons' wife left him for. Well, then he I guess it falls into like a type of love with her younger sister. And he then was in a relationship with her for quite a while. Ron Hubbard comes onto the scene, who ended up creating Scientology. And following that, Ron Hubbard convinces the three of them to put all their money together to start a company called like Allied Enterprises or something along those lines. And Jack Parsons essentially is the one that puts in all the money. The woman puts in nothing, and Hubbard puts in hardly anything. Hubbard convinces him to buy a yacht with it, and then takes the yacht and goes off onto the East Coast with this girl, just leaving Jack Parsons with nothing. Jack Parsons ends up doing a ritual to summon an elemental for doing a working for Babylon. In doing that, he summoned a great windstorm and was able at the same instant of that windstorm to damage and almost sink that vessel, which had to be returned, which he was able to take custody of. And he wrote Crowley in a letter. It was worth only like $3,000 or $4,000. So he was essentially penniless at that point, having lost his fortune. Crowley was very confused and frustrated by these workings, in a sense. He certainly was worried about them. He had many questions about this elemental that he summoned. Parsons claims he was successful in summoning an elemental. Following this, he had rituals that he was doing with Hubbard. Hubbard apparently had a problem with Parsons. It's not cited in this text, it's cited in another one, I believe by Peter Gray, where Jack Parsons in one of his rituals had done some type of almost bisexual behavior or something. Maybe he was just nude, or I don't know exactly what it was. I forget, but anyways, it put Ron Hubbard off. Him and Ron Hubbard ended up parting ways. Parsons really seemed to enjoy Hubbard. Hubbard seemed to really prey on Parsons. And then soon after, I should kind of say they did do some type of ceremony to summon the Whore of Babylon, which I believe they claim they were successful with. That in and of itself is very interesting. And anyways, Parsons claims he was successful with that. He wrote essentially another work, a tribute to the beast, claiming he was I believe the false prophet. And at that point, or the Antichrist, I should say, really the Antichrist. And at that point, he died. He ended up dying. So, and he was literally engulfed in flames, ironically. So, anyways, it's really interesting how he gives us more color on that story as well. It's been well cited in a lot of the literature that I've talked to about this point. Parsons is a fascinating read in and of itself. The writings, though, as well with Crowley and Lamb, Iowas, and these like almost extraterrestrial beings. Here's actually a picture of it right there. It is quite something. Certainly does look alien. At least that's how one could interpret it. This is overall a wonderful read. I would just say you can see other beautiful colored images in here. There's also a glossary at the end, and there's also an appendix. It's fascinating. I'd give it a 10 out of 10, must read. The only thing I would just say is if this is your first foray for jump into esoteric topics, if I can talk, I wouldn't recommend this book. I think that you need to read quite a bit ahead of this to get context of understanding what you're reading. For someone that's brand new to these topics, I get asked a lot, where should I start? The first two books I would recommend is Valis by Philip K. Dick. The second book I would read that I would put on equal footing for someone that's a new entry is Chicken Kabbalah by Juan Milo Duquette. Absolutely wonderful as well for getting context. I, to this day, use it for reference quite a bit. So thank you for checking out Zen Mode HQ. If you got this book, please let me know what you thought of it, and take care.